Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Art in Innovation series from the Bassett Foundation. It gives me great pleasure today, I'm Jonathan Hankins by the way, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Maurizio Montalti. Many of you who follow the foundation will know of his work, I think. And if you don't, you can always have a look on the foundation. If you just do a search for his name, you'll find it. Welcome, Maurizio. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, on your website, I see that you are striving to revealing unorthodox relationships among existing paradigms. And I do know your work. I should say this to the to those following. I do know Maurizio's work. And I think that that's quite an explanation, a synthesis really, of your life, in your artistic and scientific life. It's an investigation. Your entire life is an investigation into a living of unorthodox relationships among existing paradigms, we might say. So can you just explain to our listeners and through podcast and viewers of the video what I might mean by that?
Absolutely. Thanks for this stimulating question. It's not the most usual one. And indeed, as you correctly say, somehow the extent of action that can be found within my body of work at multiple levels goes hand in hand with a motivation that I do find as an individual in this world in my everyday life. So, for instance, to make a tangible example, when talking about tackling most traditional existing paradigms, I, for instance, immediately think about our relationship towards everything surrounding us in our everyday life. From inanimate matter, so all the different products composed of the multiplicity of materials we're talking about, to the actual many, let's say the multiplicity of agents, living and non-living, that populate what we define as reality, or even farther, that populate the notion of nature. Hence my scope through my practice, again on multiple levels, on a design research level through the studious work, on an educational level through my work in academia and in art academies, on a more industrial level through my work with the company I founded. Well, it attempts to provide novel perspectives and novel opportunities which derive from possibly responsible analysis and responsible innovative outcomes that mostly are to be found at the intersection between multiple disciplinary fields. And hence this kind of, let me call them, hoping not to sound presumptuous, these revolutionary paradigms of positive advancement in the evolution of our society are in fact the key to promote a different development and a positive impact as part of the collectivity we are part of.
And if we can think about some of these paradigms, could we see art and science as representing two of these paradigms that you are intersecting between, let's say? Can you give a little bit of an explanation about where you feel you fit in within those paradigms?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a straightforward answer and then expand on it, I see myself very much at the boundary where such apparently diverse different fields encounter. This simply to say, to make a little bit of a historical reference, to reflect about how back in the days, and I'm talking not so long ago in evolutionary terms, I'm talking about several hundred years ago, art and science were inextricably connected with one another. Let's think about one of the most illustrious and well-noted artists and engineers of our time, being Mr. Leonardo da Vinci. Well, he embedded in his own persona and in his own action all such different interests and eventually know-how and qualities that were expressed through different manifestations, more on a technical or on a more artistic level. Well, unfortunately, in more recent times, there's been very much of a division that brought to a quite dramatic separation between the scopes of such diverse practice, whereas science has been looked at for quite some time now as the very pragmatic practice providing tangible facts, as opposed to art being conceived as something completely based on ethereal ideas, maybe for some. Nevertheless, when you look at the scopes that the different practices have, and you look at the laminal boundary that is to be found at the encounter between such different, apparently different fields, you understand that the goals that they pursue are mostly often exactly the same. It's not that the methodologies that they apply and the tools that are therefore taken into consideration and made use of are inevitably very, very different. Inevitably also the type of audience with which each discipline tends to relate to and speak to is a different audience. And this is what, through my work, I tried in a certain way to, and still I'm trying these days, to remediate, to show that there is not one or the other, but there is a fundamental relation that needs to be taken into consideration, where the confluence of know-how and, again, of all the different very, very valuable inputs that can derive from one side rather than another, or many others too, need to converge to in order to create unorthodox and unexpected opportunities. And that is where innovation ultimately is to be found.
And presumably you came through one of these fields and met another field, or did you? How did you come to sit within these fields?
So I actually have a little bit of a mixed background, as I priorly studied engineering in Italy to follow up with my master's studies in design in the Netherlands. And while going through the development of my research for my thesis graduation project, I was actually tackling different notions related to life sciences. Nevertheless, in order to thoroughly attempting to understand what I was trying unraveling, I had the necessity to get in touch with different professionals from the specific field I was interested in, so microbiology and more specifically fungal biology. And I was very privileged to be welcomed by Professor Vosten at Utrecht University. This opening gave me the chance to enrich my background knowledge when it comes to the dynamics governing life at all levels, particularly in this case at the micro level when coming to the life of fungi, and to get acquainted with the use of tools and facilities that hardly I could ever have afforded at the time, in order to really effectively tackle some visionary and yet experimental processes that were, for me, to be considered as the base ground on which eventually I could have been creating a vision. But that very, very tangible aspect was an absolute necessity. The fact of relying on something pragmatically validated was a key for then being able to proceed towards a more visionary perspective that, in the longer term, offered opportunities for unraveling innovative paths.
And how did you get interested in responsible innovation as it developed?
Oh yeah, it's been a little bit of a serendipitous process, I would say, in the sense that, well, as an individual in this world, I feel like holding a great responsibility in regard to possibly contributing to urgent changes that are needed for tackling the most severe issues characterizing contemporary society on different levels. We can think about societal level in terms of human society and relationships among each other, if not even beyond, to think about our responsibility to all the other agents that make up the ecosystem we are part of. And driven by this desire, I started working in a bit what some have defined as an anti-design perspective, where in fact I was attempting to avoid designing for creating something physical, something yet again so ever-present in our society, and working more towards a design for decay. So for, let's say, envisioning and validating eventually perspectives that could allow us to get to deal and eventually get rid of most of the materialities that surround us. And this thanks to the fundamental action of non-human living systems, and specifically fungal organisms. So this type of, all the reflections that derive from this type of investigations opened up multiple research paths that eventually led, in a bit of a medium-longer term, to identify real opportunities for societal advancement and therefore responsible innovation. And yet we believe it to be responsible, but only future generations will be able to really validate the fact that they are indeed.
Yes. What about the scaling up of your interests in industrial production and your experience with Mogu, for example? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very fortunate in seeing that the work that I've been developing through the studio practice had been very, very well received on an international level. And so that brought me at the time on multiple stages where I was keeping talking about impact, I was keeping talking about radical change, and yet I was doing that with a very, very privileged community, which is probably the 0.001% of the global community. Of course, talking about impact with such limited audience was not my scope in the first place, or at least not only that, even if functional to a broader scope. And that's out of this frustration that, in fact, my life became a little bit more complicated when I decided, together with other colleagues, to start an industrial activity devoted to the commercialization of products relying on fundamental biological principles. That's what happened in the long term, but as a first step, the wish, which one could say is also quite presumptuous from a human perspective, was one of standardizing different types of biological processes. And we all know that it's no easy thing to do, to standardize life-driven processes, in order to be able to industrialize a production of dedicated materials that could counteract the negative impact originated by the most traditional synthetic polymers that populate our everyday life. And eventually this happened, and is currently happening, through a range of offerings that are to be found today in the market in the form of products. But it's not been an easy path, and certainly there is a substantial difference between these two types of practices, whereas on the side, again, the language that you speak with a cultural audience within the design sphere and the more creative field is a peculiar one, as opposed to the dynamics and the language that must be adopted when interacting with a completely different dynamic system, which is ruled by capital as a value, and unfortunately mostly often financial capital. And so in order to change also that type of value system, we started being active within the existing system to change it from within. This is what today Mogu is strongly devoted to.
And can you just give me 2 words about what the future holds for you then, please, Maurizio?
Well, the future is exciting, and yet I have no crystal ball, but I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that looking at what we are doing and all the different efforts and sacrifices that brought us to obtain very positive results, and just to scratch the tip of an iceberg, because to be honest, we all believe to be very advanced in the field where we are operating, and we are to a certain extent, but nevertheless we are just at the prehistory of a much longer innovation journey that promises to quite intensively impact in a positive way society and the global community. I can see plenty of opportunities, specifically if I think about my work with fungi, whom I consider actually really a partner, not just another biological agent that is there to be extracted and exploited. On the contrary, an active living partner, very, very tiny, but that you are in direct conversation with and in a relationship of interdependence with. Well, actually, really the sky is the limit when working with fungi and with mycelium-based technologies. And this goes beyond the fact of being able to create new materials, new responsible production processes, and therefore new technologies. But it even goes towards the possibility of working towards intelligent, active, and adaptive systems which are capable of being kept alive and of providing us with different types of feedback when it comes to, for instance, the places where we live. To give a practical example, these days we are working on a visionary EU-funded project which is called FUNGAR, Fungal Architectures, where we are in fact constructing living architectures of living materials, not once living materials, that are capable of providing us with different types of feedbacks visible due to the change in morphology rather than to the change in their chromatic spectrum, informing us about the conditions of the environment in which we are in. And that tells a lot in terms of how much we need to learn from such processes of observation and about the potential that we could derive from such type of partnerships. Going even beyond, I've been having the opportunity to explore the possibility of growing fungi on other planetary surfaces, such as the Moon and Mars, together with the European Space Agency, where we validated the possibility of being able to transport minimal amount of materials along space travel in order to propagate it on site and create architectures that can shield us from cosmic radiation. That's another breakthrough that could be made possible thanks to the skills of non-human biological systems. And these are just few of the examples, but the future in the direction, not only about fungi, but about the role of the many microbial agents that will contribute to such responsible development, I believe is very bright and very exciting.
Well, thank you very much. That was a really, was fantastic. Thank you.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me today.
You're welcome.